Moonlight slid like a silver thread across a meadow as soft as a sigh. The hills around it leaned closer, round and kind, as though listening with their gentle shadows. On the meadow's velvet grass stood a unicorn named Leora, and her silver horn gathered the light the way a smooth stone gathers warmth. She lifted one ear, and then the other, because there was a humming in the quiet, a tender sound as light and even as a moth's wing. It wasn't loud, it wasn't urgent. It felt like the night was practicing a song, slowly, softly, the way a brook chooses its path. Leora turned her head, and the silver thread of moonlight turned with her, slipping along a curve of clover, touching a dandelion clock, pausing at a cluster of bluebells, and going on again, steady and sure. The meadow dreamed awake around her, and the humming drifted in and out of the folds of grass as if it were moving, as if it were in more than one place, as if the world itself were humming to the moon. Leora's breath made the dew tremble. She blinked, patient and curious, and listened for what the humming would do next. Moonlace Meadow wore twilight like a shawl. Every seed head wore a pearl of wet light, and the pearl did not roll away, only sat on the tiny throne of each stem, perfectly content. The hedgerow along the meadow's edge kept its secrets in lovely heaps of shadow, soft and mossy at the base, soft and leafy at the top, and in the middle a place for small feet to pass without any hurry at all. A brown mouse emerged as politely as a thought and nibbled a crumb of clover, its whiskers tracing silent zigzags in the air. A hedgehog, shaped like a cozy burr, yawned one little roll of a yawn and tucked its nose into its paws again, content to listen to whatever it had heard before sleep returned. Fireflies wove themselves into the slow air, and their light didn't blink so much as breathe, brightening, dimming, brightening, like a lantern learning to whisper. Above, the sky was not dark yet. It was the blue of a deep pond, and through it, the first stars came quietly, careful not to spill. The grass laid down its day sound and took up its night sound, a soft brushing, a soft hush, the sound of things becoming simple. Beyond the meadow, an orchard of cloudberry trees held their small dusky fruit, and the fruit held tiny reflections of the moon just waking behind the hills. The silver thread of light that Leora had noticed moved again. Not a straight line, but a shy path, bending to look at a tuft of timothy grass, pausing beside a buttercup, then gliding ahead as if to say, "Come see how the night arranges its small wonders. Come see how quiet can be full." The humming arrived and vanished like the tide of a whisper. It was not from the mouse, not from the hedgehog, not from the fireflies. It was the kind of humming that can be inside a place, the way warmth is inside a loaf of bread, the way kindness is inside a glance. Leora lowered her muzzle to breathe in the scent the meadow wore tonight. Cool mint from the shadows, warm hay from the day still sleeping in the stalks, a little cloudberry sweetness that made her ears tilt in pleasure. Her hooves pressed soft shapes into the damp ground, and each step felt like a promise the earth and the sky made to each other. The humming lingered, then tucked itself into the fold of a leaf. It would be there again, soon. She felt it. And in that pause, when everything leaned toward listening, a firefly floated near Leora's cheek and rested for a heartbeat on a blade of grass. Its lantern pulsed once, twice, and the path of light along the meadow seemed to answer, gliding a finger width forward, inviting the night to unfurl at its own unhurried pace. Leora's coat was white the way milk is white, with a soft warmth to it, as if a candle glowed behind her skin. Her horn was not sharp but smooth and spiraled like a seashell, and moonlight liked to gather there, bead by careful bead, until a tiny crown of light rested just above her brow. She loved this. She loved how the night found her and put its quiet treasures where they would be safe. A sleepy robin, not quite ready for a nest, hopped close and then tucked its head under its wing for a moment, peeking out with one bright, drowsy eye. "You hear it too," Leora might have said if words were needed, but words were not needed, because the humming was its own conversation. The robin cozied deeper and let the night stroke its feathers with cool fingers, A soft moth touched Leora's mane, and then drifted away. A tiny boat on a moonlit pond. The meadow was full of neighbors who preferred the quieter hours. Owls, who knew how calmly eyes could shine. Foxes, who measured their steps with velvet. Frogs, whose songs came from deep pools of contentment. Leora belonged to them all, and to the open hush between them, her heart settled into the night's rhythm. There was no haste. The silver thread along the grass glowed a touch brighter, and the glow hopped gently from one blade to the next, like a child stepping from stone to stone in a shallow stream. Leora lowered her head and let the dew kiss her lips, cool, sweet, tasting faintly of mint and cloudberry. Down the meadow, the humming brushed a line of clover and drifted toward a place where the ground rose slightly, just enough to feel like a thought lifting its chin. The unicorn's horn held 3 small beads of moonlight now, not heavy, not lightless, just the weightless promise of a night that knew what it was doing. Leora's eyelids slid down a little more than before. Her tail swished once, slowly, the way a willow lets go of a sigh. She watched the path, and the path watched her back. And the humming, pleased to be noticed, let itself be heard for a few more moments, round and even and kind. Some nights Leora stayed in the meadow and let the moon find her where she stood. This night, the moon asked very softly for a little company along its silver thread. Leora placed one hoof forward and felt the ground say yes in a small, springy way. She had a little plan, a gentle intention that felt like the way a lullaby promises a last sweet note. She would follow the moon's path wherever it bent and watch what the light did when it touched different things. She would gather, if the night allowed, a few beads of moon-kissed dew on her horn, not to keep forever, but to share with the willow that liked to comb the stars with its branches. The willow would be glad of such a gift, one silver drop for the tip of each long green finger, until the tree wore a quiet bracelet of night. And she would listen for the humming. Perhaps the path and the humming belonged to each other. Perhaps the humming was the meadow practicing the word it wanted to say to the moon when dawn came. She did not need to know, only to follow, only to listen. Her steps were the smallest steps a unicorn could make, not to wake the hedgehog from its soft coil, not to interrupt the robin's half-dream. The fireflies drifted ahead, as if they had learned the path long ago. Their lanterns drew a gentle curve over a ferny bend. Leora noticed that the curve was not random. The lights made a shape, almost a bridge, almost a smile, as though the air wanted to lift her lightly across from one quiet to another. She flicked her ears, patient, curious. The beads on her horn grew cooler as a faint breeze moved through the meadow, and in that breeze the humming gathered itself again, like a shawl being folded more neatly, ready to be carried. The fireflies made a bridge of slow light, joining one small space of night to the next. Above the ferns, each tiny lantern rose and lingered, until Leora could trace the line with her gaze. The bridge did not rush her. It did not need to be crossed at all. It was enough that the light had decided to go that way and invite the dark to come with it in a friendly way. Leora paused and let the pattern settle. The fireflies spelled something in the air, not letters as in a book, but a gentle rhythm. Bright, dim, bright, dim, and in the middle a longer dim, like a breath that stays quiet for a few heartbeats because everything is listening together. From beyond the fern bend, the humming answered the pattern, with a soft, round tone, almost like the first note of a song. The bridge faded, then returned, then faded again, as if to say that the way across the night is not a straight line, but a soft decision made over and over, kindly, gently. Leora stepped to the ferns and felt the moss hold her hoof in a careful cradle. There, where the pattern of light grew thinnest, a single firefly hovered, lampshade tilted, as though it wanted to show something hidden in the green. Under the fronds, tiny beads of dew had gathered into a little row along a fern's backbone. Each bead held an upside-down firefly, tiny, golden, satisfied. Leora smiled without moving her mouth, the way the moon smiles when a small cloud fits perfectly over its face, soft and snug. The humming drifted to the right, a little nearer the path of moss, and Leora knew the night wished her to notice that too. The moss made a path soft as the inside of a mitten, and every step Leora took pressed a fresh green sigh into it. The sigh rose, drifted, and then lay down again, content as a kitten finding a warm place on a lap. The moss had its own voice, small, breathy, almost like words, but not words that needed saying. It whispered the meadow's old stories in a language made of hush. A wind touched the tops of the grasses and carried the moss's whispers forward in faint, soft syllables. Leora heard one syllable she had not heard before. It was round and sleepy, like the letter that rolls off the tongue and falls onto a pillow. The syllable seemed to repeat in the humming, and Leora thought, without thinking, that the night was knitting a word out of many voices. The path turned slightly and grew even softer, as though the moss were thicker where feet went slower. A beetle moved with careful steps, and a spider paused, letting a strand of silk float in the moonlight, as though to measure how gentle the air had become. Leora felt the urge to pause as well, to let the whispering happen around her like mist around a lantern. She lowered her head a little more, and her mane brushed the tops of the moss, faint and ticklish. The whispering gathered and faded, not in a hurry to be finished. The humming hid itself behind the sound of the moss, then peeped out again. Both sounds knew how to share the same space without crowding it. Leora's hooves seemed to step slower by themselves, and the beads of light on her horn, 3 little moons, rested like tiny eggs in a safe nest. Cloudberry Pond lay between 2 clover hummocks, its surface a long sigh of silver. Frogs sat on lily pads like small green cups, set out to catch the night. When Leora came near, the frogs did not stop their song. They smoothed it. The round rolled through their throats and over the water until the pond wore rings of sound. One frog, a little slower than the rest, sang the lowest note, a note that seemed to want a friend to sit beside it, close, humming the softest harmony. Leora bent to drink and felt the water touch her muzzle in thin, cool ribbons. The frog's round matched the moss's whispering syllable, and somewhere inside the silver rings on the surface, there was space for one more sound that did not come yet. It was not missing. It was waiting the way a yawn waits, ready when the moment is right. Cloudberry blossoms leaned toward the pond and nodded sleepfully. A dragonfly drowsed on a reed, its delicate wings like the paper windows of a tiny house. Leora's reflection in the pond blinked back at her, slower than her blink, as if the pond wanted to keep her gaze a moment longer. The humming drifted across the pond and hid under a lily pad for a few heartbeats, then rose again, softer. A ring touched another ring. The 2 rings agreed to become 1 ring, larger, gentler, like a bed being made wider to fit 2 sleepers. The frogs seemed pleased, and their round grew quieter, as if the note they were waiting for could only arrive when everything had learned how to listen without leaning forward. Past the pond, the trees held their branches like shelves. Leaves made pages, and the pages turned, not quickly, but with the care of hands that love a book and do not want to wear it thin. Each page carried the day as dust of golden pollen, and the night as dew of silver water. Every so often the wind, librarian soft, lifted a page to show the moon something sweet. Leora stepped into the aisle the branches made and felt the cool shade fold around her. The humming entered here with a hush robe. It seemed to put a finger to its lips, just for fun, and then went on. A leaf, not high, not low, right at Leora's eye, wore a pale mark that the moon had left behind. The mark was a curve and a dot, smaller than a raindrop, rounder than a seed. It looked like a little promise that words might come when the time was kind. Leora did not take the leaf into her mouth or touch it with her horn. She only watched it sway. The mark warmed, then cooled, then warmed again with the smallest rhythm, like a sleeping heartbeat. The library listened to itself. The creak of a branch too lazy to care about creaking, the busy rest of a beetle tucked under a bit of bark, the feather footfall of a moth crossing from shade to shade. A page turned somewhere above, and a soft sigh of leaves drifted down like a forgetful feather, landing on Leora's mane. It did not stay long. It slid off with a grateful little sound and joined the pages below. The humming waited until the leaf had finished, and then moved along, pleased with the patience of the night. From the library's edge, lantern moths rose like pale boats finding wind. Their bodies were soft as the inside of a pocket. Each moth carried a tiny glow, not steady, not hurried, breathing, so that the air seemed to have a pulse of its own. They did not fly to a single place. They drew a circle together, then another, like rings fading on water, like rings appearing on a pond where nothing had touched. Leora watched the circle drift over a tucked-away trail that even the mouse had not noticed. The moths brightened just a little when they passed over the trail's mouth, then dimmed, then brightened again, promising a path without making it a secret. Moths know how to keep light gentle. Their wings whispered at the edges, as if telling the air a very soft joke. The air smiled but did not laugh. Leora stepped near the trail and found the soil cooler there, the kind of cool that reminds a forehead of a kind hand. Her horn wore 4 beads now, and each one made a small, contented glimmer, as if speaking to the moth lamps. The moths arranged themselves one above the other, a slim column like a lantern's spine, and then loosened back into a cloud, restful as milk swirling in a cup and settling. The humming tipped its head toward the trail, then away, like a lullaby trying out a new note it might use later. Leora tipped her head too, and felt the night tip with her, friendly and playful, never pressing, only inviting. First, one raindrop, then the idea of another, then a small purse of drops, loosened by a cloud that had decided to become a kind of drum. The rain touched the leaves politely, then less, then more softly, until the sound was so tender that the leaves lifted themselves a fraction so they could hear every tap and let it in gently. Soft rain changes a night. It makes light rounder. It puts a new shawl on the humming, so the notes don't catch on anything. Leora stood under the cloudberry trees and watched how the rain beaded. Drops gathered where branches met, and then let go in the slowest plop, the sort of plop that never startled anyone. When a drop slid along a leaf and fell onto Leora's nose, she blinked with contentment and let a small snort flutter the drop away. The drop landed on the moss and didn't mind at all. The moths lowered their lamps half aglow. The frog round softened 2 steps further until it felt like breathing more than singing. Pebbles in the brook nearby changed their little clinks into a glassy hush, as though each pebble had found a pillow. The path stopped being a path and became a series of very patient pauses, places to be still and let the rain finish its thought. Leora felt the rain right along her back in tiny lines of cool. Her horn's beads welcomed small silver brothers, little guests who did not stay, who rolled down to meet the ground and become part of the hush. The humming became clearer as the other sounds became gentler, and the syllables from the moss grew longer between breaths. The rain, pleased with how carefully it had softened the night, grew lighter and lighter still, until it was only memory on the leaves and a clean smell rising from the earth, a kind of kindness that lingers. A brook curved near Moonstone Hill, stepping around roots and over smooth stones the way a lullaby steps around a yawn. The pebbles wore water like glassy scarves, and when the stream moved, the pebbles made tiny, gentle clinks, the smallest bells anyone could imagine. Each pebble had its own note, and the notes decided to be friends. Leora stood where the brook narrowed, and the sound gathered into a song that thought about being a song, and then chose, instead, to be a comfortable hum. Here was the missing note the frogs had waited for, almost. It hovered just on the other side of the clink, shy and content to be shy. Leora dipped the tip of her hoof into the water and drew a line. The line shivered, smiled, and smoothed itself back out. A minnow nosed a pebble and then hid, tiny tail quivering with calm. The brook pushed a leaf in slow circles beside a rounded stone. Leora breathed the damp scent and felt her shoulders ease, as if the sound were a hand smoothing a blanket across them. The humming echoed the pebbles and braided with the frog round. It waited. It promised. It kept its promise by waiting kindly. Above, low branches let their tips drink the water's cool air. The pebble choir grew quieter still, just a clink here, a clink there, the way stars appear one by one until they seem to be all the sky, though truly, they were always there. Moonstone Hill rose from the meadow like a pillow half fluffed. Along its slope, white stones lay in a loose path, drowsy as sheep who had chosen to sleep near one another without quite touching. These stones kept a bit of sunlight inside them from the day, and now traded it for moonlight, fair and friendly. As Leora came nearer, the glow in the stones gathered itself, not brighter so much as steadier, like a heartbeat that finds a calm rhythm. The humming, too, found that rhythm and rode it with ease. Leora felt the hum at her feet, as if the hill were a giant cat, purring. The air above the hill wore a faint shimmer, a ribbon not yet tied, a smile not yet finished. The night was in no rush. The moths trailed her, content. A fox, careful-footed, paused and blinked in silent greeting from a tuffet of grass, then curled again, chin on tail. Leora touched her horn to a moonstone, and the tiniest click of light moved from the stone to the bead on her horn, a friendly hello from one brightness to another. The bead did not grow bigger. It only looked more certain of itself. If the humming had a home, it might be just beyond the hill's crown. Leora did not climb faster. Each step took its time the way a yawn takes its time, beginning as a thought and finishing as a feeling. The glow waited at the top, patient as old friends who enjoy the quiet before saying anything at all. Between the last moonstone and the hilltop, a silver stream crossed, slow as syrup, clear as a memory that makes the heart ease. A fallen log lay from one bank to the other. Not a bridge, exactly, but a comfortable old idea of a bridge, a place where crossing is just another kind of staying. Leora placed her hoof on the log, and the log thought about creaking and chose not to. The water under her moved in silky spirals, round and round, down and down, as if practicing the shape of sleep. Leora stood with one foot forward, then rested. 1 foot down, then rested. A moth came and sat on the air beside her, its tiny glow slow and steady. A ring of water widened and widened until it forgot it had ever been small. Time learned how to drift too. It lengthened into soft ribbons that tucked themselves around Leora's legs and braided with the grass. The humming seemed to ride the spirals, curling in and out of the water's motion, gaining nothing, losing nothing, content to be part of the quiet, moving world. Leora's horn beads felt very cool. If she had breathed a sigh, it would have been the sigh the stream was already making. At last, as gently as a cloud moves across a moon without meaning to, Leora stepped to the far bank. The log, pleased with its important, unhurried task, rested even more still than before. Up the last rise of the hill, the glow waited, not a waiting that asked, a waiting that welcomed. On the hilltop, the air was thin and soft as a blanket aired on a line. 2 owls stood on a low branch of a leaning tree. Their feathers held the color of bark and the calm of dusk. Owls are most active when light is kind and quiet. Their eyes gather the night the way ponds gather the sky. These owls blinked at Leora as if tasting the starlight, as if sipping it. One owl turned its face to the left and showed a pale, round moon of a face. The other owl turned right and drew a whisper from its throat, a whisper that could have been a syllable, could have been a sigh of recognition. They both lifted their wingtips and pointed, not sharply, simply surely, toward a tender shimmer above the hill. The shimmer bent, only a little, like a line drawn by a sleepy hand that keeps drawing even as the eyes close. The humming came forward, and it was as if the hill itself shaped the sound with its roundness. The owls approved with a second blink. Slower. Soft. Leora felt the space around her soften too, as though the night had a nest for every thought and every breath. She waited with the owls. The waiting became the whole thing, sweet as honey. From the quiet above the hill, a silver ribbon loosened itself from the moon. It did not fall. It arrived, the way drowsiness arrives. A pleasant weight on the brow, a softness around the eyes. The ribbon bent toward Leora and paused, polite as rain at a windowsill. Moonlight loves manners. It loves slow gifts that fit gently. Leora lowered her head a fraction. Her horn beads glimmered to one another, making a tiny ring of light that did not need to be seen to be true. The ribbon touched that ring, and the touch made no sound. Yet every small sound in the meadow seemed to hear it. The pebbles grew still. The frogs held their low note like a baby bird cupped in a leaf. The moths hovered without flapping for an extra moment. Even the drip from the last raindrop waited on the very tip of a leaf before letting go. The ribbon draped itself like a bow, the kind one ties when a gift is too lovely for knot and string, when the bow must be its own soft promise. The humming rose and opened into a melody so even that Leora could feel it before she could understand it. It was the same word the moss had practiced, the same syllable the frogs had rolled across the pond, the same hush the leaves had turned between their pages. It was a word the night liked to say to itself, the word that helps a hill be round and a cloud be kind. It was a word that sounded like and then softer still. Leora stood very still, because stillness was the best way to join the song without adding anything at all. Her horn wore the bow of moonlight, as if it had always been waiting for such a simple adornment. Beads of dew along her mane learned the shape of the bow and glowed a little in understanding. The owls bent their heads once more, a small nod given to wonders that know how to be small. The melody moved outward, touching places that had been curious earlier. The firefly bridge returned for a heartbeat and settled into a gentle line along the fern bend, content to be a memory of light. The library of leaves closed a page with a soft smile of sound. The pebble choir stepped back into the water's hush, pleased that its little clinks had helped point the way. The frogs completed their round, and the missing note arrived exactly when it wanted to. Not late, not early, just like a yawn finding its favorite moment. Leora felt gratitude like warm milk in a cup, safe and simple, something to hold for a while before letting it be part of the air again. Moonlight on her horn was not heavy, not brighter, only true. Only true. The ribbon did not tie, only rested. The melody settled into the meadow's thousands of gentle places and without stopping, grew so quiet that it seemed to be nothing at all, which is how the best songs end when they wish to keep company through the rest of the night. Down the hill, the willow lifted the ends of its long green fingers and shook them lightly, like someone waking from a pleasant dream and remembering that there was a sweet thought to visit. Leora walked to the willow's side, and at each step, the moon bough trembled, its silver soft as a promise. The willow welcomed her with small movements that were almost words and almost a hug. From the owl tree, the owls floated down and found a branch lower than before, content to be near without asking anything. The hedgehog came, rolling carefully to keep its drowsiness tucked inside. The brown mouse peeped from the clover and brought a seed as an offering, because that is what mice know to do when they feel happy. The frog's low note hummed through the grasses like a purr that belonged to everyone. Leora touched the tip of her horn to the willow's leaf. A single bead of moon-kissed dew loosened from the bough, slipped along the spiral thread, and rested on the leaf's fingertip. The leaf shivered with quiet delight, and the dew did not fall. It held on, a small lantern, as though it had found its place as surely as the moon had found the sky. Leora gave a bead to another finger, and another, until a necklace of slow, silver stars formed along the willow's edges. The willow sighed in a voice made of breeze and thank you. The library of leaves added a leaf-soft echo. The pebble brook let one gentle clink rise, then rest. Lantern moths hovered near and dimmed their lights in kindness, so the willow's necklace would be the brightest thing here, which was still not bright. It was only serene. The fox lifted its head, blinked into the calm, and tucked its nose again along its tail. Gratitude moved through the meadow, like a cat moves through a kitchen. Regular, known, welcome. It touched the bluebells and the fern, the cloudberry blossoms, and the moss. It also touched the humming. The melody that had opened at the hilltop now returned into every small sound and made it sweeter without changing it. The night did not need to be different to be lovely. It only needed to notice itself and smile softly, which it now did. Leora stood with her friends and let the grass tell her ankles about coolness. The bow on her horn rested exactly as long as it wished to, which felt like the time between one heartbeat and the next, but stretched so gently that a whole part of the night fit inside it. When the owls blinked, their lids moved slowly, a kind of applause reserved for quiet things. A moth landed on the willow as lowest leaf like a punctuation mark at the end of a happy sentence. It was the middle of the night, a soft middle, a woolen middle, where everything was wrapped and careful. Nests, burrows, hollows. Each one was a cup for a creature and a cushion for a breath. The robin settled finally into its nest, and one small feather drifted out and then drifted back, as if unwilling to leave kindness behind. The hedgehog found a fold of leaves that felt exactly like the right fold. It turned one slow circle, then half a circle, then stopped, and let a small snore like a kitten's purr begin in its throat. The mouse polished its seed between tiny paws and stored it for the morning that would arrive in its own time. Not now, not soon, later, when dawn would walk slowly across the hills. The willow, wearing its silver necklace, lowered its branches a little closer to the earth and brushed the grass with the tips, 100 tiny bows. Frogs placed their chins on their lily pads and blinked at the moon as if to say, "We remember the song even while we rest." Lantern moths landed in the crooks of branches and folded their wings neatly, glow tucked away like a nightlight half covered by a blanket. Leora stepped into a hollow at the base of the willow where the ground felt like a friendly lap. She did not lie down at once. She let the place become her shape, and let her shape become the place. And when both were satisfied with the company, she lowered her legs slowly, slowly. The bow on her horn grew thinner at the edges, not fading, only relaxing, like a ribbon that has slipped slightly and found a more comfortable angle. A last moonbeam lingered across the meadow and laid itself along the backs of the sleeping stones. It did not ask to last forever. It only asked to be part of this moment. Leora's eyes, heavy in the nicest way, watched the moonbeam choose one patch of moss to warm with cool light. The humming was now the world. Brook hush, frog low note, leaf rest, moth sleep, owl breath. Together they shaped a lull that did not need an end to be complete. Clouds drew a soft curtain across the sky and left the corners open so the moon could peek and be content. The hills, rounded and sure, leaned a little closer until their shadows met in the meadow's middle, and then settled, a blanket tucked without any hands. The willow's necklace dimmed by the smallest shade, not because it must, only because the night loves to fold itself neatly toward rest. Fireflies drifted down into the grasses like tiny embers, easing into the beds the blades made for them. The library of leaves closed its pages and pressed them together with a satisfied hush. The pebble brook kept one slim ribbon of sound for company and let the rest hide in the smooth places between stones. The frog's round became a hum, became a breath, became a quiet that still remembered singing. The lantern moths kept their glow as a memory at the edge of their wings, a soft thought for later. The owl stood with eyes half-lidded, and watched the space where night and sleep share a small, friendly border. The last moonbeam stretched, sighed, and softened into the air, leaving a cool kindness behind, a kindness that would not hurry to be anything else. Leora's horn held a whisper of the bow, which now felt like a thought one might have just before dreaming, a bright thought that does not need words. She let her chin rest nearer the moss. Around her legs, the grass rose and fell with the tender breath of the meadow. Above, the curtain of clouds moved scarcely at all. Beneath, roots nestled where roots like to nestle, with earth listening to earth. The humming did not stop. It became what the night always is when it remembers itself. And softer, and quieter. And then so gentle that it felt like the quiet smile of the moon itself, tucked safe behind the soft curtain, holding the meadow in a hush that knew how to keep.